Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. Welcome to Wrestling Rebooked with Spoiler and Andeve, rewriting your favorite angles the way we want to believe. Putting wrestling into submission, finally that time has come. We used to rely on Meltzer, now we bang our own drum. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. The Spot Monkey is here, shooting from the hip, back to break more, and ready to let rip. Spoiler is the host. Will his mic be ready to go? He loves a mat clinic, and we're ready to start the show. From Mania to Survivor Series, a wrestling podcast. Each match rebooked, fresh views are cast. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. Our finger is on the pulse for all the latest news. What's going on with Vince? We don't really get his views. We love a doc and review, old school to new. I think it's time to tap out. Hit the music. We're through. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission.
Episode 17 of Wrestling Rebooked. Hello and welcome. We are back putting wrestling into submission. And on today's episode, we're going to be reviewing Wrestlemania Backlash. And we're going to also have Alex McCarthy, US combat sports journalist for Talk Sport. We're going to be interviewing him. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up shortly. But as ever, co-host shooting from the hip, trying to dodge zombies in his every day-to-day life. A Spot Monkey. How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. I'm looking forward to recording this episode of Wrestling Rebooked Wrestlemania or whatever you want to call it, yeah.
Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, but also follow us on Instagram and Twitter if you search Wrestling Rebooked, and shoot on us. Right, let's get into it, shall we? Wrestlemania Backlash, 16th of May, 2021. 6-match card. We opened up with one of two triple threats. Charlotte versus Asuka versus Rhea Ripley for the Raw Women's title. Andy, thoughts?
Thoughts on the match? It was okay. I felt it was a little bit of it was clearly a warm-up match in terms of the show and in terms of feud. It looks like Charlotte and Ripley are going to take this feud further, and Asuka's once again been sidelined. But I felt it was a bit paint by numbers. Nothing about it really grabbed me, got me excited. So, yeah.
15 minutes and 22 seconds the whole thing took. What were your highlights? What was the good points about it, though?
I quite like this guy, Burke, on commentary. I like his linking back to the history, and he talks about Charlotte's history and this sort of stuff. I mean, I quite enjoyed that. The highlights, I guess Ripley winning is a highlight in itself. Charlotte going for the double cover is interesting in terms of, it's linked to Reigns, who's obviously stacked them recently. And Charlotte is certainly comparable to Reigns. I thought Ripley looked very smooth with her drop kicks and her suplexes that she was dropping in. So I guess they're the highlights, I suppose.
I think part of the reason we're struggling with this match is that the booking in the first place. So for me, Charlotte really didn't need to be in this match. And if we're all paths lead to Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte in some sort of rerun from their WrestleMania jaunt a couple of years ago, last year, wasn't it? Then just have match versus Asuka, let her get pinned, as was what happened anyway. It doesn't need to be another triple threat on this card. And just let her Charlotte bubbling away in the background. For the match itself, I thought Charlotte looks like in fantastic shape.
Are you sure? Are you sure it's Charlotte? She looks totally different the last time I tuned in on wrestling. She and I know Meltzer or Cornette or someone, I saw them talking about it, but she looks, it's up to her how she wants to look, but she looks totally different, doesn't she?
For the better?
I I mean, I can't remember what she looked like before. I just remember thinking different. So, I mean, who cares what I think? But I was just noticing rather than a sort of assessment.
Yes, I noticed the shape she was in, definitely. It's incredibly lean. And okay, you can mark that down as a good point if you want, but for me, it ends there. Match is triple threat. Like it's just so truncated. No one cares about Asuka. She's never going to win. She's not a legitimate threat. So it was just a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, and I guess if Charlotte is the main event player or the moon amongst the stars or the star amongst the whatever, the one that's supposed to be riding high, I actually thought that her performance was not as good as it should have been, not as good as we used to. And I'm one of her biggest fans, or certainly have her as one of my top stars that I enjoy watching. But some of her selling was off. She took a boot from Asuka, which she sold really badly. And then that was highlighted even more because then Ripley took a boot from Asuka and sold it really well. And then I also thought the end, I don't really know where Charlotte was at the end. There was no reason for her not to be involved. She just was on the apron, off the apron, and then it was gone. So I guess the disappointing part of this match is that Charlotte didn't really, you're saying why is she there? I suppose she's there to elevate it with star power and star quality. And the star quality was a bit off for a change.
All they're going to do is Charlotte will come back, without even seeing Raw, Charlotte will come back and say, well, I wasn't pinned. Didn't beat me for the title, and on it goes. And, just a bit of a... Anyway.
Did you want to rebook it?
Yeah, I think I just did.
Okay.
Bill for Charlotte, Rhea Ripley at SummerSlam. I'll take that.
Yeah. And what does Asuka do now?
She'll probably get buried in a tag team somewhere. That seems to what happened with everyone else that drops down from the main event scene. If they're not pregnant, they're going into a tag team.
Fine.
Right. Next up, we had Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode, the Dirty Dogs, against Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio. But of course, Dominic was taken out pre-match in a heinous attack. The match itself for the SmackDown tags went 16 minutes and 58 seconds. We're going to spend considerably less talking about it. In fact, Andeve, I'm going to give you 30 seconds.
Okay.
Which I'm going to put on my watch, and you can talk us through your thoughts. Are you ready?
Yes.
Go.
Okay, I think it was a shame this was in the Thunderdome because this is a legitimate moment, a historic moment where the father-son team has won the tag titles and now has the strap and the belt. So that's really disappointing, even though actually the result was a good one. I thought the match itself was fairly obvious. Mysterio backstage, he's then going to come in and save the day. It was fairly routine up until when Dolph Ziggler hit a super kick on Rey. Then there was the inevitable hot tag eventually once Mysterio turns up, but it wasn't much of a match for me. Fine then, let's see if you can do that 30 seconds better. I spent too long being excited about the fact it was a moment that was missed than actually talking about the match. Your 30 seconds starts now.
It was slow, it was boring, it went way too long for what it needed to be. I think the actual narrative of the match is fine. You can have, the story that the WWE wanted to achieve with the Mysterios, but it didn't need to go 16 minutes, and it didn't need to have Roode and Ziggler, two of the best workers in the company and the best looks, be dragged down that path. Other than that, a filler match on the card should have gone on the kickoff show.
Oh, it's not even... So I'll ask you a quick question then. So you're a big fan of Roode and Ziggler as a
individually, yeah. So I was just going to sort of follow your question with exactly that. Individually, I think Ziggler has fairly been one of the best workers that they've had for many years. One of the most sort of reliable, consistent workers. You think he's helped pave the way for McIntyre, really, where he is now, and always does his job in the ring. Roode to a lesser degree. I think he's less smooth in ring, but has fantastic look and has been around a fair bit. And I think it's someone that they can fairly rely on too.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Ziggler definitely, in terms of selling, he's never quite got back to where he was when he cashed in that Money in the Bank and the crowd and the support. I think Roode, sort of a late developer in terms of he spent a lot of time in Impact or TNA, whatever it was Beer Money Inc. Then was on NXT. I'd love him to go back to that glorious gimmick just to hear the entrance. But he is a good worker. They are a solid tag. I guess if I'm rebooking, I think it is the right decision. But because it's not in front of fans, I would wait to do it. And I don't think that hurts the storyline. If you were to rebook it, would you just chuck it on the kickoff show? Or that's how you'd rebook it. You just change it and shorten it, I guess.
If you look back over the last 12 months, how many times the SmackDown tags have been on a PPV? You won't need more than one hand, put it that way. And all of a sudden this match is there. So obviously they just did it for the Mysterio angle, which is fine, I guess. I'm not being a miserable bastard about that. I'm going to swear on this episode, by the way.
What about Mysterio Jr.'s push? I'm sort of looking at my screen, off the screen there. What about Mysterio Jr.'s push? Is it too soon? Is he equipped enough to do what he's doing? Is the spot sort of okay? Does it matter because ultimately you're just paying homage to Ray? What do you reckon?
Do you know what? I didn't mind the storyline with Seth last year when they had his daughter and Ray's wife involved as well. Like, I know a lot of people were hating on that. I didn't mind it until it got to the stage where they were, tearing each other's eyes out. But at this point, all of that momentum and heat has gone. Not even heat because they're baby faces, but all that kind of push from the initial arrival is gone, and he's now just wrestling mid-card matches on SmackDown. For me, there's so much talent waiting to come through. I personally was, stick him in the Performance Center, let him sort of own his skills a little bit, because they're not quite there, are they? He's never going to be his father, and and that's fine. But let's have him sort of develop a little bit, go away for a bit, and come back when he's ready with his own look. He could do it banging on a few kilos.
Yeah. He's so young. That's probably why, isn't it?
Yeah, he's 24. Yeah. And let someone else have that spot at this time.
Fair enough.
We've done well with 30 seconds each there, haven't we?
Yeah, we've milked it.
Well, maybe we'll make up some time for the next match, because Damian Priest beat The Miz with John Morrison in his corner, Johnny Drip Drip, in a lumberjack match. 7 minutes and a second. Second too long, if anything. The lumberjacks were zombies around the ring, which of course was a connection to Dave Bautista's new Netflix. Is it a series or is it a film? Who cares?
It's a film.
It's film. Right. Okay. As soon as I saw the zombies, and I saw obviously they changed the Thunderdome to like the army sort of background, I just fast forwarded. I didn't actually watch it. Did you?
I did watch it. Do you want to hear my good points?
Let's have it.
We've covered them. I found it. I'm sure they were doing some useful stuff in the ring, because Miz and Priest have a lot of potential, but I didn't fast forward it, but I just couldn't watch it and appreciate anything they were doing.
Yeah.
I don't have any good points at all.
Yeah. I saw a clip on Instagram. There was an Elvis zombie. So there's all zombies, and then one of the zombies was dressed as Elvis.
Like I said, I'm struggling to watch it closely enough. Here's some lines for you. That zombie has just prevented ... How do you not focus on the zombies? ... There's a distraction from the undead ... In unison to fight their way through a field of zombies ... Do you want to hazard a guess of what those are? That's quotes from the commentary team as the match is going on, which tells you all you need to know. There's nothing good about this match. Michael Cole is poor at the best of times. Never mind, or whoever it was on commentary, never mind when that is what they're presented with. And I suppose actually I would say the good thing is fair play to the four performers. Austin's walked out for less than that. He's walked out. They've gone out there and done that. The match itself, that is just totally not for me. Big Bryce says just watch wrestling. Tom Colicue says watch the wrestling you enjoy, because the whole product is not for you. I suppose this falls under that category because it was just awful. I understand the crossover and the need and the exposure, but what are you trying to achieve with that? And I suppose Tom Colicue would tell us, independent wrestling journalist Tom Colicue would tell us, it's about YouTube clicks, impressions, likes, but nothing about that match did anything at all for me.
So basically what we're saying is that wrestling has to be a or is now a platform for individuals or for companies to promote their stuff, because that's basically the only reason it was there and the only purpose it served. If that buries The Miz, Morrison, Damian Priest, who cares? Doesn't matter. They'll bounce back. But we've got this film to promote.
Yeah. And I guess alongside that is maybe we're a little bit older as wrestling fans, and maybe the 8-year-old kid that's watching it, that's their favorite part of the show, I guess. But for the demographic and where we're coming from, I absolutely hated it. Absolutely hated it.
Move on, shall we?
Yeah.
All right, Bianca Belair, Women's SmackDown Champion, up against Bayley. I was excited to watch this match. It was 16 minutes and 2 seconds. Let's get into it, shall we? I thought first off, they're following the absolute share of shit that came before it. So fair play to them to actually, in the context of things, then actually walk down that ramp and attempt to go out there and have a normal match and take themselves seriously and take it seriously. But the way that they locked up and that their agility to work with one another across the ring, who cares even if they've just rehearsed that in a performance center for weeks before, don't care. Like, to see that executed the way they did it, the first couple of minutes, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And their chemistry actually together was good. Your thoughts on kind of the opening and leading on from the zombies?
I was just thinking, I wonder if they'd have done that zombie stuff if there were fans. I wonder if there were fans, because anyway, whatever, enough about that. Yeah, this is good. They're clearly going all in on Belair. I think more so than they are with Ripley. People were talking after WrestleMania, have we just created the new set of stars? Is the horsewomen's era over? Of course, no, it's not. They'd be silly, because, here's another horsewoman in the main event, in the SmackDown Women's sort of main event. But they're definitely making Belair an equal. She's not an underdog fighting from below. She's not struggling to break in. She's not on the edge, on the periphery. She's actually an equal of the four that have carried the torch. And you can see that from the start, where Belair is mostly in control. There's no, to begin with, Bayley having the upper hand or heel tactics. It's Belair in control. And okay, then later Bayley slows the pace, but it's Belair from the onset. And she showcases her power a lot as well. There's a kick out where she chucks Bayley almost out the ring, and then she does a sort of suplex and a drop onto the apron, and it's all about Belair. And then they're also making her hair a feature. So I thought the finish was really let down the match, actually, because they obviously watched it a little bit, or it wasn't as fluid as they imagined. But she obviously used the hair to whip Sasha, and she's using the hair there as a device to help her with the submission. So I really thought it was very much another platform for another one of the horsewomen to put over Belair. Does that sound fair? Similar to what you'd think, or where would you place it?
Probably much to the disappointment of all of our viewers and listeners. I would agree with 90% of what you're saying there. The platform is the worker mentality of the heel. Also happens to be one of these so-called four horsewomen, who are the perfect foil for the athleticism and the creativity of Belair. And when you've got that dynamic, it is working so well. So you're right, as Belair came out the gate and worked really fast, heel tactics, Bayley slowed things down, kind of dictated the pace for the next sort of 5 or 6 minutes. And then they built nicely towards the finish. Agreed, finish did look slightly botched. I think they maybe overthought it a little bit in terms of how they're going to execute that, whether they were going for a screwy ending.
Yeah, that's...
So that was a shame, and that brought the match down a notch. But to follow A, the zombies, and B, a women's triple threat they'd already been on, which was Pony, then I thought this was a massive step up in the overall for the card.
Yeah, and it's good for Belair as well, because that's back-to-back significant matches where she's been a main component of the match and not been carried. I think if I was rebooking, apart from the ending, which just like, I think overcomplicated is the way to describe it for sure, like you said, it would make more sense if Bayley hadn't been forgotten for the last 6 weeks or whatever, you know. Bayley is an incredible athlete, a legitimate champion. And last time we saw her at WrestleMania, she's been thrown down the stairs by the Bellas or whatever. If you really want to put Belair over, then what you need to do is have her going over against a strong and valid Bayley. So that would be my rebooking, not necessarily the match itself, but going back over the last 5-6 weeks, just making Bayley, and before that, making Bayley seem a little bit more the legitimate Bayley we saw when she was champion with Sasha.
Yeah, so I don't know about that, because I think some of the promo work between the two of them in the build-up has been quite good. And that moment with the Bellas at WrestleMania has been referenced. It doesn't excuse it, but it has been referenced nevertheless. I don't think Bayley came off or comes off with any less credibility. She hasn't been on TV as much and maybe took a bit of a break after dropping the title. You know, she's well known to everyone. She's on TV regular enough. It's not like she's lost any momentum necessarily. I think maybe my only bone to pick with it really, and I'll come on to maybe to make the same point later, is just the timing of the match. We've gone straight from Banks Belair at WrestleMania straight into this match, and you've gone with your two biggest stars right up front in the space of a month.
Where is Sasha Banks?
Leave of absence.
Right.
You know, I'm not HR, but you know, it would have been nice if this actually built SummerSlam. But you know, I realise I'm living in the dark ages slightly.
Yeah. Well, I think. I mean, I only saw it pop up on the Twitter feed at W Rebooked for anyone that wants to follow us. I think they've changed the next pay-per-view, haven't they? Or Hell in a Cell has been brought forward. So I don't know if Hell in a Cell, is it now before Money in the Bank?
Yeah, so it's all changed around, hasn't it? I'm not sure right now, because literally just a couple of days ago, things got switched around. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. I thought Hell in a Cell had been brought forward, but I wasn't sure if it was before Money in the Bank. I suppose my point is, and you'll probably tell me that this isn't the order of the pay-per-views, but maybe this gives another chance for Bayley Belair at Hell in a Cell. But again, it feels a bit quick for them to get to Hell in a Cell, but you know, whatever. Yeah, so Hell in a Cell here is being advertised as June. Right. Money in the Bank in July.
Fine, so they've switched it.
Yeah, August SummerSlam, Clash of Champions September.
Okay, yeah, so they definitely brought Hell in a Cell forward. I wonder if that's because it's how far Peacock's got involved in that. Anyway, but that maybe means that there's at least another chance and opportunity for them to have another match, although they could have had that Money in the Bank. So maybe I'm just talking nonsense as usual.
Yeah, well, that's per Oliver Browning on GiveMeSport.com that I've taken that from. Yes, anyway. Fifth match.
I've got a feeling we might disagree on this match.
Let's get into it then, shall we? Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley versus Braun Strowman for the main WWE title. Match that went 14 minutes and 12 seconds, of course, under triple threat rules. Are you going to tell me you like this match?
Yeah, I thought this was absolutely excellent. Absolutely excellent, this match. Two things to start with. I thought they looked phenomenal coming down the ramp. The entrances and the pyro and the stuff that's on the screen that probably isn't even in the arena, but it's on the screen, you don't know. Phenomenal. The look of the three of them was absolutely phenomenal. And actually the way that they were presented, for the first time in a long, long time, I saw three people being presented as exact equals, all behemoths, all powerfuls, all absolutely jacked, stacked to high heaven, high impact moves, powerhouses. And I thought this is exactly what you want from the main event scene. You want people that it's not 50-50 booking. It's not, oh, he's won because he's hurt his arm. And the other. Actually, this is three behemoths just going at it, level pegging, and probably felt that that Lashley definitely was going to win. But genuinely, you could see the three of them with an element of credibility with the title. So I thought that start presentation shows that WWE is actually invested in these three guys, which makes such a difference. That's my opening anyway.
For anyone not watching on YouTube, I just rolled my eyes. Do you not think that like McIntyre has just had so many main title matches now, despite his look, despite his entrance, despite his star power?
I mean, he's chasing now. He's chasing a triple threat. Strowman in the mix is fresh. McIntyre.
Fresh.
Yeah, well, he wasn't in the title match at WrestleMania, was he?
No, but how many times has he had main event scene runs?
Probably not that many. I mean, when he should have had it at WrestleMania 34, when he smashed everyone in the Elimination Chamber.
Well, I was including that, but yeah, okay.
When he had the chance with the Money in the Bank, they screwed it up because they were too worried about putting the Shield over, and they turned him heel. His stuff with Reigns was phenomenal when they were both presented as equals and they were tipping over ambulances. He was as over as anyone could be. So I actually don't think he's had that many opportunities. Probably what's happening is that any opinion is being flavoured by the nonsense that WWE put him through last summer, where he smashed up Goldberg as a late replacement. When the one time Strowman wasn't hot going into WrestleMania the last few years, he won the title, and then he was in that nonsense feud with Wyatt, and I think that's probably hindered his credibility to the extent that he's in that match at WrestleMania with McMahon. But really, his body of work prior to being sort of sidelined in the run to WrestleMania 36, I actually think he does deserve to be in that main event picture. And him and McIntyre, him and Lashley, McIntyre and Lashley, I think it's a fresh matchup, the triangle.
Fair enough. For me, starting on a negative foot, because it's another triple threat, and not only have like the triple threat concept just been massively overexposed over the last couple of years, but it's now twice on one card, which I just thought didn't necessarily need to be, and also twice on the Raw side. But anyway, the match itself, I didn't think much to like. Okay, they look great, big guys, a lot of throwing around, great athleticism, but essentially the booking there is we'll have a big spot for Lashley, which isn't that different to Kurt Angle throwing Shane O'Mac through the glass at King of the Ring. And then he just disappears and then walks back into the ring, and just spears Strowman, and then just pins him. That's what it's good.
But I mean, at that point, Strowman and McIntyre have been smashing the hell out of each other. 5 minutes. If the match had gone on another 5 minutes, it could have potentially to be a real epic. I mean, they start and they're just smashing each other. Double suplex. Is it Strowman and McIntyre on Lashley? And then Strowman comes off the top rope. He does a choke slam on Lashley. And McIntyre's off the top rope, but he launches Lashley, does a zigzag as well. They're just hitting each other hard. And Lashley and McIntyre outside by the steps, brawling on the stage. And then once Lashley's gone, it just set the agenda or set the tone for McIntyre and Strowman to beat the hell out of each other. Someone dropped a Michinoku driver in there as well. There's some super power bombs through the table. And okay, so Strowman takes the pin, but McIntyre hit him with a Claymore. Then I think there was a spear. Then McIntyre's kicked out, and then Lashley picks up the pin. So you protect McIntyre, who probably is your top guy. You protect Strowman, who you don't want to look weak because you presented them as equals, and Lashley keeps the title and looks phenomenal. I guess it just depends what you like. For me, it had a similar feel, although the match is very different, but similar in feel to Owen Zayn at WrestleMania. Owen Zayn it's a very different style, but it's non-stop, very quick. Move. Wow. And this was similar, albeit high-end power moves. But I was fine with that. And especially when I'm looking on the card and I've had to sit through Miz Priest and the tag match and the other triple threat. Like, this was a change of pace, change of direction. It wasn't too ludicrous, which Owens Reigns, for example, was a few months back, where they were going off forklifts and all this stuff. I just enjoyed it. And I guess, I know it's not really your cup of tea, but I guess it is mine.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's wrestling, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think for me, in closing summary from my perspective, it just wasn't much of a narrative. And just hearing you talk about it there, you were talking about sort of one move after the other. And it didn't, for me, really knit together much of a story, which I think the match preceding and proceeding did.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I get. For me, the story is that I thought the match worked nicely in segments. So, as with all triple threat matches, it seems to happen. Someone's got to lie down on the floor for a while.
Yeah.
Except at least when they were lying down on the floor, it's because they've gone through some staging or a table or whatever. There was a few link ups where they, did the 2 versus 1. And for me, the story is they were trying to put over 3 big guys as 3 equal guys, which I think is absolutely fine because obviously 2 of them have to lose, and you don't want them just to disappear down the cards. I mean, that for me was an acceptable narrative. But I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like it.
Rebooking?
No, I don't think so. I'd give it another 5 minutes. I really would. How would you rebook it?
I'd like to have seen Lashley sell that LED board a bit better.
What, some stretch it to the back and then come back in or something?
Yeah. Blood?
Just disappear.
We'll come out with a fake wig or something.
Well, like when he was the sisters. They did say in the commentary, where's Lashley gone? He's probably just down the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Hamper's knee, but yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, yeah. For me, quick pace, full of good moments. I enjoyed it.
Main event, Roman Reigns with his special counsel, Paul Heyman, against Cesaro, WWE Universal title. This match was 27 minutes and 34 seconds. What a match, Andeve.
I don't know about what a match. It was pretty decent.
You didn't like it?
No, I did like it. I'm just, what a match. I didn't have that feeling.
I did.
Go on then, tell us, let's make it good. Let's make it positive.
I didn't really have any expectations for this coming in. Obviously a fresh matchup. Haven't seen too much of Cesaro in ring with Reigns. And some of the technical link ups and some of the throws and the suplex from the outside of the ring, the ebb and flow of it was really, really gripping. Not to mention, of course, Heyman. You can just sit there and watch his face and he'll tell you all you need to know or all you need to think. I enjoyed the fact that there was until after the final bell, there was no run-ins and they just let the 2 of them have the match. My only negatives, and there are only 2, is one is the fact that we're in the situation booking-wise with Cesaro in the first place, as I've touched on previously. I would have liked to maybe, if he was built up a bit more, then the jeopardy would have been a bit higher for Reigns. And secondly, the finish.
Yeah, they seem to be leaning on that sort of finish a few times now where the person doesn't tap out, they just...
Yeah.
But they used to do the 1, 2, 3, and then the hand doesn't go up, and then the ref calls the bell. But here the ref just sort of looked and called the bell, and you're like, oh, is it over now?
I think that's been done to death so many times now, and it's now not a thing, is it? Everyone knows that the arm's not going to drop on the 3rd.
Yeah. I think when I was watching, before getting to the match, I think the montage building for this story, the story itself is absolutely phenomenal. Reigns is the most compelling character, head of the table. Jimmy and Jay, are they on side? Are they both on his side? And you've got the council. That storyline is fantastic. And then Cesaro in that, he's not the greatest talker. Maybe he is the greatest worker, though. I just thought that montage just seemed superb as a start, as a build to the match. I thought the opening was very good. Probably expect me to cry because it was slow, but I actually like the fact that they're trying to say, look, hold on a second. Cesaro can go one-on-one with you here, power versus power, strength versus strength. Like, you can't just bully him as you might have bullied Daniel Bryan or as you might have bullied your brother, your cousin. So I like that start.
Yeah.
What I didn't like so much, this is a personal preference, but I understand why they do it. But when I think they overdid it. Cesaro and his bad arm. I get that that's obviously a chance to show, that's why he can't win, but maybe it's just the commentary or whatever. Oh, he can't lift it. He's got a bad arm. Oh, Reigns taxed the arm again. Oh, Cesaro can't hoist him up. Bad arm. It's just sort of, I get it. Yeah, fine. But anytime that happens, I always find it a little bit frustrating or takes away from the match. So that's just a personal preference, stylistic, I guess. But that was I found that a bit frustrating. I don't know what you thought about that.
I don't mind it. It's wrestling textbook stuff, isn't it? Like selling an injury or selling a specific body part. And I remember growing up as a kid, that kind of story, that kind of narrative is really easy to grip onto and buy into. I guess what you're saying there is maybe an element of it's been done to death and you've seen it so much and now you're having it rammed down your throat by the commentators.
Yeah, felt overplayed a bit.
Yeah. But I think in this day and age where all that commentary is scripted and, everyone is, told to the nth degree, like, hey, we're going to this match and he's going to sell this. That's just the way it goes. I didn't mind it too much. I didn't feel it really detracted from my enjoyment of it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, for me, maybe it comes back to, because Rollins is one of my favourite performers, comes back to when he came back from the knee injury and for the next X amount of months, it was all about his knee or whatever, and his surgically repaired knee. Come on. What I think, in terms of positives, is that Cesaro is a different sort of challenge to Reigns. Also, he was ground down for a little bit, but then he comes back with those uppercuts and some sort of corkscrew uppercut or move he did, a crossbody. So actually, Cesaro is a different style of opponent, which I think is good. Reigns has now been title coming up. I mean, it's going to be a year come SummerSlam, so I can't see him dropping it before or even at SummerSlam. I thought the out of the sharpshooter into the crossface was good. So I'm talking about maybe we've seen the end a lot of times and we've seen someone injured a lot of times. Actually, that felt like I have seen it before, but you're not sitting there thinking, oh yeah, I remember when this person did that. Actually, it was very, very nice into the sharpshooter, into the crossface. I, like you, didn't care for the finish. I also didn't care for the post-finish with Rollins hitting the ring.
Well, I was going to come on to that, to ask you about that. Yeah, it didn't feel like it was in the right place for the show and just totally out of context of what was going on.
Yeah.
And that's before you get to it looking a bit weird that they beat up Cesaro, who was already beat up and had already lost.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, they're trying to keep Reigns and Rollins apart, but together. So, that's the money match. That's the big match with all the history. Rollins is legitimately able to dethrone Reigns. Obviously, they're both heels at the moment, so it doesn't really work, but they're just keeping that there for you. And it allows Cesaro to stay in the mix. They've done now with Strowman, Lashley and McIntyre. You could add Rollins in there and the three of them can have a match and whatever.
Not just a triple threat.
Well, yeah, as long as it's the only triple threat on the card. I think we've heard that yet. But it just seems a bit unusual that the show went off the air with Rollins standing for Cesaro when Reigns is the one that's beaten him. Reigns was in the title match. Cesaro's the up-and-comer. So why, apart from the fact Rollins is dressed fantastically or awfully, depending how you look at it, why is he and his music hitting as he ends the show? I didn't quite get that.
I'm with you. I haven't really got any answers for you. I couldn't fathom that one either through their logic or my own logic, which are often two very different things. I couldn't figure out, what they were trying to achieve by having him. Did they just want to get him on the show? Are they trying to plant seeds for a new rivalry? It's just a bit odd. I would, if we're going to have anyone, then I think the USO angle would have been better.
Yeah. Which surprisingly, I saw the match. I saw how long was left on the network, and I thought, okay, so we're going to get a finish here with 100 false pins and people coming off the top rope and all this sort of stuff. And actually, none of that happened.
Yeah. Until
after the match, and then I thought, I wonder what they're teasing. Is Rollins going to turn on Reigns here, or is Rollins going to turn on the Usos? But then he didn't. So it just it didn't really make sense. But I mean, you said what a match. I was a bit surprised. I suppose taken aback. You'd say like what a match. But I did think this was one of the two really strong matches that I enjoyed on the card.
Yeah, fair. Except I think our two strongest matches are different. Yeah, maybe it's because I'd endured some of the other stuff on this card. This kind of stood out. Maybe because my expectation was low for the pairing, but yeah, I really enjoyed this. And rebooking, I think, as we've already talked through, to be honest, like I just would have had that finish slightly different, and certainly not had the run-ins.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was the best match on the card. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Fair. Closing thoughts on WrestleMania Backlash?
Yeah, so I'm struck by guests we've had on before in terms of Tom Colicue, independent wrestling journalist, or maybe with PW Torch these days. He's saying that, WWE is not a wrestling show where you just go and you watch people in a ring perform moves. They're catering to different audiences, different media forms, different platforms. So don't tune in and expect to like everything. And that really rang true, because there was lots of it I didn't like, and the epitome of that was the zombie stuff. Big Bryce says, just watch wrestling, watch as much as you can. I guess between those two things, I'm watching it all because we're doing this show. But really, there's two matches I enjoyed in the card, the two men's title matches, and I recommend watching those. The rest of the pay-per-view I won't really be bothered about. Maybe Bella Bailey you could watch as well, but I guess that's where we are now in 2021. You pick your matches, you pick your storyline, your feud, and your characters, and you watch that, and the rest of the show you don't expect much from, and you shouldn't get too worried about it.
Fair.
What were your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with mostly, this concept of you don't have to like everything, but the stuff you are going to like, for example, the first and last match, in theory, I just would have liked those storylines and those superstars to be built for a little bit longer, so they are just legitimately more over. And yeah, you can make the argument of the here and now, and everyone wants stuff immediately. But if you actually take time to build stars, you're going to have people invested in the product for a longer period of time. That's been proven many times over.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, they put themselves into a corner slightly with, the results of all the matches were somewhat,
Yeah. So we've done the classic thing that we do on this podcast, is we've talked about a pay-per-view or a match, but then extrapolated it out much further into the broader themes, concept, ideas, philosophies, etc.
That's fine. That's what we do. Spoiler Andeve.
Exactly. That's what you get.
Shit from the hip. All right. Should we get our guest on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that must mean that it's time to tap out.
Not quite. No. We're going to hear from Alex McCarthy next.
Oh, okay. False finish.
False finish for Q2. The crowd have popped. No, we caught up with Alex McCarthy, TalkSport Radio, in an interview that we did with him. So we're going to jump to that right now. All right, episode 17, Wrestling Rebooked, and a big welcome to TalkSport US Combat Sport Guru. How's that? Alex McCarthy, welcome.
I'll take it. Thank you very much for having me, fellas. Thanks for the invite.
No, pleasure's all ours. So we thought you'd get you on. Actually, been making some fairly outlandish remarks on social media regarding the recent WrestleMania and some of the big matches went down there. So Banks Belair, you've got down as a top 5 WrestleMania of all time.
Nothing outlandish about that, my friends. Nothing.
You're sticking by that.
Sticking by it, yeah, definitely. I said it's in the discussion, in fairness. So I would say it's in and around the 5th mark. I'm not going to say it's like top 3 or anything like that. But I do think when you put into context not only what the match meant, because that's one thing of like the historical significance and, 2 black ladies and, well, just 2 ladies in a singles match as well, right? It's the first time ever. But man, like they delivered so good. In terms of like the actual storytelling of the match, they couldn't have made Bianca Belair any better. I really don't think so. Like if you were tuning into WrestleMania for the first time and you had no idea, like as casuals sometimes do or whatever, and you saw Bianca Belair in that match, man, you'd be absolutely made for her because she looks so powerful and dominant. Sasha did what Sasha does. The amazing spots, be it walking up the steps with the gorilla press. That's like they're going to play that in replays for years, boys. And the same with the hair whip, all leading into the finish. Man, I just thought it was beautifully done, and those WrestleMania moments, that phrase is kind of played out, but at the same time, the victory afterwards, it felt like a monumental thing. The same way Daniel Bryan at 30 and all of that. Like, you can't always capture that. Sometimes WWE try and make you feel it, right? Like Roman Reigns beating Triple H or whatever, and it's not there. But this, when I say top 5 main event all time, I mean everything that it encompasses, be it the emotion, in terms of like the crowd reaction and all of that stuff. Because there's been, sure, maybe there'll be better technical matches, right? I'm sure Zack Sabre Jr. will do some wild shit in Japan. But in terms of WrestleMania and a main event, what it meant, how they delivered, absolutely, it's in around that top 5. I would stand it against. Like I said, there are some that you just wouldn't like. Yeah, I'm not going to be out here making too wild claims. It's not, I don't know, Rock and Austin or anything like that. But I definitely think it has a significance that some others can't.
Yeah, I think you make a good case. For me, it probably doesn't make it into the top 10. It'd be quite easily edged out of the top 10. But I definitely think your point around 2 African-American women in the main event, both of those things separately would be huge stories. And that's what wrestling's about, not just the event, but the paraphernalia that surrounds it and the context. And so the fact you've got 2 women in a singles match in the main event and 2 black women in a singles match in the main event, then there's definitely the context there. And I also think that since WrestleMania 32, we've been treated to some fairly poor main events. And the sort of pinnacle of that was last year, and Strowman and who was even fighting? And then
Goldberg.
Was it Strowman, Goldberg, and McIntyre, Lesnar?
Well, both of them were just like finisher fest, weren't they?
Identical squash matches, finishes. So we're sort of, along the last 5 years, the main events have slowly dipped off, and this was a return to form. Dave Meltzer doesn't even think it was the best match of the night. He thinks Cesaro Rollins was better, and he thinks that the main event, night 2, was better. He's given them both 4 and 4.5 stars, and that's the same 4 stars that he gave Banks and Belair. What'd you say to them?
Could not care less what Dave Meltzer rates a match at all. My stance on Dave Meltzer's star ratings has always been the same. Like, it's cool, I guess. Like, it can be a good guide for some people, and I respect the man in terms of, like, he's an historian and he's been doing it for so long and all that stuff, but in no way does what he rates a match influence my tastes on wrestling, and nor should it do anyone else. Like, to have that as like a yardstick bothers me a little bit. I don't think you should use that as a metric. Also, you think easily outside the top 10. Have you got 10?
I got many. All right, here we go then. So ones that I would put in there that I think are above it. Rock Austin, WrestleMania 17.
Yes.
Angle Lesnar, WrestleMania 19.
Yes.
Undertaker Michaels, 26.
Yeah, 25 was better, but yeah.
So, but I agree. So I've also got a load of others that weren't actually main events, but sort of could be considered.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like, that's where it becomes difficult. Like, it was a main event. That's what we're talking.
Okay, fair enough. But it's main event night 1, right? So technically, is the main event not night 2? But
I would. That's actually a valid point. I would actually class. I'm sure if you were the performer, you would think being last on the actual whole weekend is the main event. But I guess that's semantics at this point.
Yeah. Rock Cena, could I have that in there? WrestleMania?
Fuck off. No way. You must be joking.
I think in terms of spectacle, the draw rates. All right, there's a few.
Come on now. You're honestly gonna say buy rates are a part of it.
All right. What about then? And this is not one I enjoy, but people have it up there. Brett Shawn, WrestleMania 11.
Yeah. Again, I think that's. First of all, I'm a huge
not
rock
for me,
fan.
actually,
I'm a huge rock fan, by the way. So, like, it's for me to actually say no is something. But I think, don't you think Brett Shawn is one of those things that's almost like revisionist, where they're like, oh, Iron Man, and I think if you actually watch it,
it's boring. It's boring.
I don't think it's as great. It's a great feat to go an hour in the main event and all that stuff, but
yeah,
not.
No, I totally agree with you. Actually, I would actually have Banks, but they're above that. I just threw it in because people will be saying,
No, you're right. People would have it. There are
Yeah.
some people that would have it. Not me, though.
All right, then what about a couple of, I don't know if this is cheating because they're triple threats. What about WrestleMania 20 with the man who cannot be named?
No, yeah, definitely. That is amazing.
I'd have that as better. And then what about WrestleMania 30? Orton, Batista, Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, I basically used that in my argument, so I can't really say no. But I actually prefer, I don't know if this is controversial. I prefer Bryan Triple H that night to that triple threat.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I do think that was an amazing match, which really set the table. The finish is great. I love it that Batista tapped, right? Like, that's just the little things. I put them two very close to each other, the triple threat and Banks and Blair.
Okay, fair enough. So there's a few in the mix. These two are the ones I think might be controversial. What if we chucked in Cena's back-to-backs at 22 and 23 against Triple H and Michaels?
Nah, not for me. I mean, I like and respect Cena, right? But I think later in his career, I enjoyed him more than what WWE would probably consider his apex.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you name like one great spot from either of those matches?
I actually haven't watched them recently. I can't really remember them. I just remember sort of thinking certain Michaels.
To me, they're not like all timers. You know what I mean? They're good, I'm sure, but yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's. I've got a few others on my list that don't really get there, like Hogan Andre, but I mean, it's not a good match, is it? It's more for the spectacle.
Again, that goes back to what we said earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, technical. Either it depends what your criteria is. Like for me, obviously, what I felt or took in, I kind of laid out. That I felt like they achieved it in great fashion. You've named. I think I totally agreed with 4, maybe 5. So as I say, I think it's in and around that ballpark. I would have it between 10 and 5. That's probably like a fair assessment.
Slipping down the list, isn't it?
Well, I think 5. There's a case for it to be 5, which would be true with the statement.
Yeah.
What about if we chuck in one more? The most recent one I had on my list was Lesnar Reigns.
What, from 34?
No.
I was at that one and it was booed out the fucking building.
Yeah, we were there too, asleep by that point. That's when running around looking for a tag partner and all that.
Yeah, you're talking about
31.
31.
I think that you have to include the Rollins cash in for.
Yeah, so really we're talking about the triple threat. I mean, without the Rollins cash in, no. I do think it was pretty good, by the way. Like just the way Lesnar was ragdolling Reigns at that time. That's kind of what people wanted to see. So I did enjoy it, but I think without the cash in makes that, and I don't know if that's fair. You know, again, it's a murky one, but I would also consider that one of the all-time Mania moments. So maybe it strays into a different conversation. I don't know, but
they're probably similar moments. Would you say? I guess Bella holding the title up at the end, both of them in tears, and Rollins at the end, waving the title around. They're probably comparable in terms of moments, those two.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've both had sort of very different journeys. And obviously there's different feelings between Belair arriving and Rollins arriving. But I do think, yes, in terms of significance, you've got a very good point. Because, you know, Rollins was made after that, man. Everyone was, you know, he'd had a great run with the briefcase anyway.
Yes.
Where he'd really cemented himself, but then, you know, he's probably, I don't know, has there been a better briefcase holder since Rollins?
Well, it leads on to our kind of next point perfectly, really, because we were kind of having the discussion around that main event and thinking, does WrestleMania make for big and new stars in the same way that Money in the Bank or indeed the Royal Rumble does in the last 5 years?
That's a really good question. I mean, you look at WrestleMania, I think because that's the grandest platform and everything builds to it. Typically, that's where you arrive, right? Like, and there are countless examples of people that have done that. Even, you know, we mentioned Cena earlier when he first put Big Show on his shoulders at 20, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big moment. And people are like, wow, you know, and then he wins the title the next year. There you go. I still think in terms of making stars, like where it starts, typically speaking, should be Money in the Bank, should be Royal Rumble. You know, Drew McIntyre's a good example of that. He was like perennially considered a main event talent or someone who could do it. And then it felt like he really did do it. All right. Didn't love the Lesnar win at all. thought it was rubbish, actually, considering what the two of them could have done.
Yeah.
But the build to it, I was really excited about it. Like, you know, the way they were going back and forth on TV. And I thought McIntyre had a stellar year on pay-per-view as well as the champion. So, you know, all of that considered, I would say McIntyre has arrived at the position that the Royal Rumble was meant to make him arrive at. You know, then you look at Money in the Bank last year, it was fucking Otis. So it's, what were they thinking all along with that? You're either going to, like, go with him or don't. You know, I wouldn't have put it on Otis in the first place, but what they ended up doing was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So there's some really tragic scenes there. Someone went off a building.
two deaths, apparently.
Vince did that stunt first as well. Amazing.
It was just, I think it's been such a powerful tool down the years. Like, you could argue Edge and Punk, either the road would have been a lot tougher or would they have ever arrived at the main event scene. Edge, like, again, that sounds crazy saying that about Edge now, but if you were watching back then, he really was struggling to kind of break to be a main player until he did. You know, it was like, from his tag team success to world title success, it's like, what, 5 years? So
long time.
It wasn't as seamless as, you know, if you're a young fan now, you just, you're 11-time champion. So I think there's a lot of that. I think WWE have undersold the importance of making at these events. I wouldn't have got rid of King of the Ring. That's another discussion. King of the Ring made a ton of guys. You know, Brock Lesnar being on that list as well. So I think that can always be where it starts. But the crescendo to all of these things tends to be WrestleMania. So maybe the answer is one goes hand in hand with the other. Like, you know, is it as emphatic to win the Rumble if you then don't go on and do it at WrestleMania? That's kind of something that is held against you if you don't. Same for Money in the Bank. If you cash in at Mania, which obviously we know is few and far between, magic. Or the night after with Dolph Ziggler, magic. But again, it's situations and circumstance. It's all so important, and the timing. So my actual answer would be, I would love WWE to take Money in the Bank and Royal Rumble a bit more seriously and who they have win. But I do think having Bianca win this year was an amazingly good decision, as was Drew the year before.
Yeah, that's interesting. I agree with you in terms of, if you make the Rumble and Money in the Bank really, really serious, and if Money in the Bank builds to SummerSlam or Survivor Series and Rumble builds to WrestleMania, then you actually are really taking time to develop and elevate two new stars. I went back and looked at some comparison between the Royal Rumble in terms of how successful it is in creating stars and making champions, and then the Money in the Bank and how successful that is. And so just a few things to throw out here. Up until 2018, so a little bit behind, half of the men that won the Rumble then went on to be champion at WrestleMania. However, in terms of Money in the Bank cash-ins, over 80% of cash-ins, I think it's 83 or 5 or something, have been successful. So winning the Rumble doesn't necessarily mean you're then going to be successful at Mania, whereas Money in the Bank seems a more, and I guess by the nature of it, because you cash in when the other person's down and out, a surefire way to win. And then just a second thing alongside that is that WrestleMania 36 was the first time there was a new champion based off their winning at the Royal Rumble since 2005. So what's happening is the stars that are winning the Rumble, Edge, McIntyre, Rollins, Nakamura, Triple H, Reigns, Batista, Cena, Sheamus, Del Rio, Edge, going back 10, 11 years, they're all already stars. So it's sort of people that are already established, already doing well, that WWE wants to back in their main event at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
As Money in the Bank has been a bit more, like you're saying, Edge or RVD as well when he won and cashed in, Punk, Swagger, even back to the Miz when they won it. So I think Money in the Bank takes people that aren't stars or has done and tries to make them stars, whereas the Rumble is a bit more established in terms of who they back and pitch for their WrestleMania.
Yeah, I guess you're less likely to have a left fit. Like I couldn't imagine Otis winning the Rumble, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's normally, because it's such a big pillar for WWE in the calendar, typically speaking, it is going to be a big star. But then every now and again, you do get, you know, even the names you ran through that list, there's a lot of them that weren't world champions before the Rumble. McIntyre, Del Rio, Sheamus. Actually, Sheamus had been, hadn't he, with Cena?
I think he had been, yeah.
So, like, I mean, there's a few in the list. It was like when they made McIntyre, but then they had Charlotte win it that year. You know, do you need Charlotte to win it? Probably not. You know, she could get to a title match, well, we've seen, in any way she wants. The same with, the other thing they do with the Rumble sometimes is really lazily get to other places, like Rock Cena 2, right?
Yeah.
That was like the most telegraphable year of all time, because Rock beat Punk earlier in the night. And it was like, I wonder who's going to win the Rumble. And of course, it was Cena. So a lot of that, like you said, the Money in the Bank is much more of a breakout event.
Yes.
If anything, if you win the Rumble, I think that holds more significance because of the historical value. So, like, they have the power to make people with both events, but, we've seen time and time again that they often use it as like a booking vehicle. Randy Orton wanted to get to Bray Wyatt. Did he need to?
Yeah.
Not really. There's a lot of situations like that, but I do think a lot of people are pining for, particularly Money in the Bank, this year to have more of a significance than it has done in recent years.
Yeah, and I think in recent years they've had Lesnar won it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, which is just really degrading. He definitely doesn't need it. Randy Orton doesn't need the Rumble, but Lesnar doesn't need Money in the Bank, does he? And that's really sort of taking away someone else. When Ziggler won it, for example, and cashed in, it's not going to be the same when Lesnar does it. So you need to make it more. I like that, the idea of it being breakout and significant.
Yeah, like Strowman won it.
Yeah,
and he hadn't won the world title yet, so everyone's like, "Oh!" And then he just kind of chucked it away. It was just
that ended horrifically in that Hell in a Cell match. That was
exactly
there was no contest because Lesnar came and broke it. That's the point of Hell in a Cell. Yeah, really frustrating end.
Yeah, so we could sit here and debate it all day, but WWE can just say "fuck you."
What are your thoughts on families in wrestling in terms of you look at Reigns and the feud that they've got at the top of the card at the moment, and how that maybe stacks up historically compared to, say, the Hearts, whose impact in wrestling spanned decades?
I mean, the Hearts, like you just said, they're so the Samoan dynasty is one thing, right? Like, that's, if you want to go on Wikipedia and look at the family tree, it is extensive. With the Fatus, and it moves over into the Anoa's and all of that stuff, right? Like, The Rock is kind of born into it on the his grandfather's side, and then his dad, who actually obviously isn't Samoan at all, but he married into the family. So that's kind of how it all branches down. And you look at it now and the influence on the business. Just today, you got the Usos and Reigns, who are, you could argue on their day, the best in the business. I say that Usos in a tag team capacity, obviously.
Don't get my Jacks.
I've got nothing to say. But with the Hearts, that had such a wide-ranging effect on the business. Stu Hart particularly, right? The patriarch. Like, the amount of people that came through the Hart dungeon, basically any good Canadian wrestler you can name of the last, few decades came through the Hart dungeon. So from that perspective, you could argue that the Hearts had a wider effect on the business. But from the Samoan standpoint as well, has there been bigger stars than The Rock? Could have Bret Hart. I would argue The Rock was a bigger star than Bret Hart. You definitely could argue that now. Even like Roman Reigns, I guess, in terms of the landscape today, makes it easier to be a bigger star, maybe. But again, Bret Hart's a better wrestler. But you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of them. I think it's very hard to calibrate who is like more influential or not. But I do think it's important. Back to the question, having this lineage in the business, having these families. The Rock's daughter is going to be the 4th generation superstar, which carries some weight, in and of itself. Randy Orton, of course, as well. There's a lot of these people that, some of these people get fumbled terribly as well, like Curtis Axel. But, I do think the Samoan lineage has done amazing things for Roman Reigns right now. Obviously, I say that as if they did it on purpose. But the tribal chief, I've made this point before. We all wanted Roman to turn heel, right? It's pretty much universal. Everybody wanted Roman to be heel at one point. They could have turned him. They could have made him a bad guy. He could have started cheating to win. He could have done, heel 101. And it wouldn't have been as nearly as impactful as what he's doing now. The tribal chief makes what he's doing now. The great story he did with Jey Uso. We look like we're getting kind of like a part 2 with Jimmy. And eventually, if everyone's to be believed, that leads to The Rock. It's just a massive, massive story that, Rock and
I would say Rock and Reigns is like this generation's Rock Hogan from 18. You could make that claim. Is there a bigger match? I'm asking you to. Is there a bigger match they could possibly get than that to right now?
No, but I think the counter argument is, and for all the good work they're doing with getting Reigns over as being this mega star that we're all enjoying the process, is that where's the next star coming along to have that match and to have that rivalry, a la Rock Austin, right? And if you just spend a long period of time building to Rock Reigns, which is fine in itself, like where's the rest of the card? Where's the upcoming stars?
Who takes it after? I guess. I mean,
yeah.
Again, there's nothing wrong with obviously having a strong pillar at the top of the company, because who would you really have take it off him right now? Like, that would make a stronger, more compelling story than that.
That's the point, isn't it? There isn't anyone they've just sort of, to use your word, fumbled Cesaro somewhat by throwing him in at the main event. And he said, gone and had an amazing match. Fine. But now where does he go?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think we could criticize WWE. An example would be what we said about the Money in the Bank for the hot potato and changing of titles so that they don't mean too much. Actually, building Reigns and building Reigns and building Reigns. Big E's on the card somewhere lower down. Come SummerSlam next year, is it Big E?
I like that idea.
Building to The Rock gives Reigns, when he beats him, I assume he beats him, an even bigger platform, which means that the person that dethrones him, the one behind the 1 in 21 or whatever with the streak with Lesnar, the person that then beats the person that beat the man becomes the man themselves. So I think it's okay with Reigns, because at the moment there's no one credible to beat him. So that's fine then. Just let him keep bulldozing through people. I definitely agree. His gimmick it's the same gimmick we booed when he was supposed to be a face, just a slight shift. And that's so booable. It's just fantastic. In terms of the two families, as much as Bret Hart, Owen Hart, the Hart Dynasty, it's hard to compare them in terms of titles, because you're also chucking Yokozuna into the conversation as well. And you've got 5 or 6 Hall of Famers there. The Rock is maybe the biggest star in the business. You've got Reigns, the biggest star in the business currently. They must have main evented 7 or 8 WrestleManias between them. Loads and loads of titles. I think in terms of their success in the business, I'd probably argue that the Samoans are more successful. But I think where the Harts have an edge is as someone mentioned, the training. So I think Edge, Benoit have all been through that Hart dungeon. Like I said, other Canadian wrestlers as well, and their impact and influence on the way people wrestle and the style of wrestling is probably greater than the Samoans, who they don't really have a distinct style. They're good for the business. They have a lot to offer, but the Harts, you can almost see their style in the way people wrestle, which is probably where their impact is more keenly felt.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that you look at the way Daniel Bryan wrestles today, a lot of that is kind of Dynamite Kid Chris Benoit-esque, which again is a link to the Hart Dynasty. Natalia has said in interviews as well, they kind of carry on the Hart Dungeon today with TJ Wilson, who again is a phenomenal mind for the business. I guess it's like two different conversations, right? Because are the Samoans trying to? Well, I saw Rikishi saying he would train Bow Wow, but apart from that, it's more like you said about the lineage. And I mean, the Usos have got a brother on the independents right now who's killing it, and you got Jacob Fatu as well in MLW. Like, there is a lot of different guys out there. Obviously, we can only see what we got, and there's levels, but they'll get there, I think. It doesn't look like the production line is going to stop anytime soon. If you look at, though, like you said, if we were going to compare success overall, I don't know how we would stack that up. What would it be? Like Bret Owen and Jericho and whatever, like Benoit, and then you Rock, Yokozuna, Reigns, Rikishi, Alpha and Seeker. You go all the way back, right? I would say the Samoans probably have more. Vince bloody loves the Samoans, I'll tell you that much. But the Harts, I think that's one of them where Stu Hart, if you actually centralized it to his influence on the business, if there was like one singular person between the two that you would say was the most influential, I would say it's him. But overall, I'd go with the Samoans. It's a very complex question.
Yeah. I got one last point. I was looking up what the WWE think, and WWE has them at 2 and 3. in the most influential families.
McMahon's.
And the McMahon's at number 1. Yeah. So he's got the McMahon's as number 1, the Hearts as number 2, and the Samoan boys or family at number 3. But there you go. Classic Vince. I suppose if it's your show and it's your you might as well rate yourself as number 1.
I mean, technically, I guess there is no one more influential than Vince McMahon, technically. But there you go.
All right, we'll get a couple more points before we let you go, Alex. Rock Austin, in terms of criteria for drawing over time?
What, versus each other?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Who's 1 and who's 1A, basically?
Oh, it has to be Austin. It pains me to say that, but it does. When he was hot, right, and I think if you watch that documentary that they did on him recently, and they've done one on the network and all that great stuff, oh my word, it was so electric. Like, I mean, I was only 10, you know, I was like the peak of my childhood fandom when Austin was killing it, and it was like nothing else. You know, he, in terms of merchandise, you know, JR says he was cutting like $1 million checks every month, which is absurd because the superstars only get like a fraction of what the WWE gets. So imagine how much he was selling to get that. You know, the house shows were selling out constantly with Austin on top. And it's very hard to make a compelling case for Rock because he was doing it, or he came to the fore when Austin had done it or was doing it.
Yeah.
So you can't say like a different time period, oh, he did it as well. It's very hard to make a tangible difference. You know, easily The Rock's gone on to be the biggest star in the history of wrestling. Easily. I don't think that's a stretch to say that. Nobody is as famous or as well known as The Rock. But in terms of like drawing power, merchandise, pay-per-view buys, I think the only way I could make a case for The Rock is I know him and Cena drew really huge for that WrestleMania. I think that was the record for a while.
Yeah.
But again, you have to take into account like the climate and how things change. And I think for his era, wrestling has never been popular than when Austin was on top with the highest rated segments. He sold the most merch. He sold out the most shows. I don't know what any criteria I could go, you know, find that would go against him or would make a stronger case for anyone else.
Yeah, I think it's fair when you push people or people are pushed, JR or whoever, they always come as out with Austin is number 1 and The Rock is 1A. And I think I heard JR say, and I think, yeah, I mean, you just said it as well, though. You versus JR, who's more authoritative? But anyway, I agree at least. JR said Austin was the biggest star during the biggest period of WWE, and he drew more in terms of live events, merchandise, pay buys, and TV segments. So across a number of criteria, at the time when WWE is at its peak, with Austin as its number 1 star at its peak, Austin was doing stuff that no one else has ever done.
No one's ever been hotter, which is fair to say. Like the only way you could make an argument elsewhere would be like, oh, Hogan helped build WrestleMania, right? Like that would be, he helped build the company to get the pillars in place for everyone else. Okay, cool. The other thing for The Rock, when Austin was out between late 1999 and most of 2000, that man stepped up. He, you know, Austin wasn't pulling in the ratings then, and The Rock was. So that's a way you could say, well, he didn't need Steve Austin, but still nobody reached the heights, right? Like as great as they were doing, you've made the point perfectly. The hottest time in the business, he was the highest in literally every category you could possibly fathom. So I don't know how you can't say it's him.
Yeah, I dropped by Rock's Wikipedia page. Just there was any way you could claim. I mean, there's some decent stats on there in terms of Rock Cena is the biggest WrestleMania and he's headlining it. WrestleMania 17 was the biggest domestic WrestleMania, but of course Austin's in the other corner there, so that doesn't really hold for Rock. There's some stuff about, and again, I don't know how you check this because I've seen other sources say different things, but Rock apparently has the highest rated Raw and SmackDown segments.
He did have Raw. I think that's changed now.
Yeah, I also think
This Is Your Life was for a while, but I don't know if it is now.
But there was also an Austin Undertaker. I think a Rock match with Shane did an 8.3 rating. Can you imagine 8.3 rating today? But then actually that's second to an Austin Taker match, which did a 9.5 rating. So
Jesus.
I guess, yeah. Well, I guess when you're talking about this stuff, you're talking about two guys that are up there with, you know, the creme de la creme, the top of the top. There's Hogan, there's those two, and you might have a couple of other names in the business, but them versus anyone else, and they're always coming out on top. When you're comparing them against each other, it becomes a little bit, a bit closer, a bit tougher. But it seems that Austin just has the edge, I would say.
He shades it, I think. Like you said, 1 and 1A. That's pretty much what it is. That we'll be extremely blessed if we get anything remotely close to that in our lifetime.
Yeah. And it's a shame because it looked like Punk Cena when they were doing the Money in the Bank stuff. You were thinking, and obviously Brian came around a little bit later as well. You're thinking, is there something to do here? But it just that summer of Punk, they completely messed up.
And then Kevin Nash.
Yeah. The only other thing I would drop in is that these two obviously huge stars. I was looking at their WrestleManias. Austin is really 14 to 19, so only 6 years, and Rock 15 to 20, which actually at 20 I think he's already part-time, but he does come back and do 28 and 29. So in terms of their WrestleMania being the biggest and the pinnacle, they're actually also around for a similar amount. But you could say, well, he's been around for 25 years or whatever, or Michael's longevity. Those two both hit their peak, were around for a little bit at the top, doing things that, no one else had done. And then they rolled it back after a few years. And that means that the criteria is fairly similar.
I mean, like you said, that's the wild thing about Steve Austin, right? He was like done at 36, which is mental when you think about it. We all know why. But I mean, today, to walk away then, I mean, similar to Daniel Bryan, who was obviously able to come back, but now people are into their 40s. AJ Styles is in his 40s.
Lashley, how old is Lashley? He was in his 40s, isn't he?
45.
Yeah.
44.
And he looks better than he looks the same as he's always looked. How's that possible?
Yeah. I would say more jacked, right? Like, Lesnar's in his 40s, Rock's in his 40s. Like, all of these guys are looking better and feeling better, but, to centralize it to full timers, someone like AJ Styles and like Daniel Bryan's 40 today, funnily enough, like, these are guys who you can go on, and Austin could have had, he could have had a feud with Cena. He might have even made it for CM Punk. He might have worked, might have done something with Edge, or maybe the landscape would be completely different. He might have worked Lesnar. There's a load of different things that Austin could have done that would have been huge business. Rock is the lucky one that got Hogan. Yeah.
Which also could have been in the mix for main event, right? I mean, I know it's the second on the card, but that was the main.
That's what I'm saying. Like, when we say main event, because I would have had Rock and Hogan. Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest matches in wrestling history. And again, if you said, well, hang on a minute, Jesus Christ, Hogan can barely move or whatever. Yeah, it's not technically the greatest match you'll ever see. But have you ever seen a crowd more gripped? It's like the beauty of wrestling. They literally had them in the palm of their hands. And that's why I would say, in terms of raw emotion, and watching it live was insane. Like, I would put it up there as one of the greatest matches ever. It accomplished everything that it's meant to, but it wasn't the main event.
All right, so just taking a left turn then before we pull over. British wrestling scene as it slowly starts to come back. Are we like to see you at any events? Are you going to be involved at all, taking any interest?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Progress shows before and stuff like that, Ali Pali and Electric Ballroom, and I would very much like to see how they're going to be looking coming out of this. I know that they're trying to rebuild their image because they were as hurt as anyone, right? Like, with the Speaking Out movement. ICW as well, and Rev Pro. I haven't been to a Rev Pro show, to be honest, but I have been to an ICW show. There's even OTT in Ireland. I expect them to come back strong as well. I mean, I think Ireland's actually struggling worse than us at the moment in terms of the pandemic, but eventually they'll come back. There's still a nice, I'm going to call it a breeding ground of British wrestling, because eventually, right, NXT UK scoop you up. That's what happens these days. That's essentially what, everyone was complaining about, the demise of British wrestling. I went to the NXT UK tapings last week. They've just finished for, I think through July now they've recorded. And you look at their roster and everyone that's there, and it is a great assemblance. Even now they've managed to bag the last standing cowboy and like Rampage Brown and people like that. I do think that filter system, you ask the superstars, they're happy about it, right? Like, it's never been more attainable for them to work and earn a good living, by the way, which is central to everything, for the WWE, and work for a big company. And if you look at Progress and ICW, there's a direct gateway there, which we know about. In terms of getting back, I mean, I hate making predictions about the pandemic because I've been wrong about 20 times, but assuming that this Indian variant doesn't fuck us all over and we get back in business in the next couple of months, I see it coming back strong, man. I know Progress are lining up a bunch of shows, and I don't see why. Just because like a lot of the stars have gone to NXT UK, I don't see the scene as dead at all.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think regardless of the conveyor belt of NXT UK, there's always going to be an indie scene to some degree, both in terms of appeal for the talent and for the niche market that it serves for fans.
Yeah,
as you say, some of those shows that at the Ali Pali, how well they were attended over 4 days, and the draw there was the indie wrestling scene, right? Not to see a Thunderdome style sort of actresses and stuff, right? The appeal is there for actual wrestling. So yeah, let's hope that over the next coming months we can get back to seeing a show.
It's funny, right? Because NXT UK in particular have put on so many matches that are kind of made famous on the indies, right? Ilya and Volta being one of them, but also Tyler Bate and Volta was at Hello Wembley, and I went to Cardiff and saw that, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, it's match of the year!" And I was like, "Well, you should have seen the first one. That was pretty damn good." But again, like you just said. Because and it's fine, by the way, if fans are like this, they might just know WWE.
Yeah,
but that is kind of proof that there is a lot going on the independent scene. It's like when we had Jericho, Benoit, and WWE years ago, and you're like, this is amazing. And they've been doing it for about a decade all over the world, but you don't know that, right? And I feel like there's a lot of great untapped talent in the UK. We've seen it the past few years in NXT UK, so I can't wait to see what else is on the horizon. I think there's a lot more talent out there. I really do.
Yeah, and I think off the back of that, I mean, arguably the best wrestler in the world at the moment is Ospreay, and you've got Zack Sabre Jr. doing bits as well. Those to be very generous with their time in terms of coming back. We went to a pro just before everything shut down, it must have been, or maybe a little bit, 6 months earlier. Ospreay was actually on the card and came back, and from what I hear from the independent scene is that they're very generous in their time in terms of giving and supporting and coming back. You've seen Keith Lee come through Progress.
Some of the Undisputed Era boys.
Yeah. So actually, once things kick into gear again, people will be desperate to go to live shows and see things. And look, WWE hasn't always been the most watchable product during the pandemic. So I'm sure people will be desperate to get back to shows, live crowds, see some stuff in action. And after a few months, I'm sure everything will be back up and everyone will be all over it again.
You're right, man. Like in terms of, I mean, I'm personally gagging to get to a live show. Those crowd reactions are everything, right? But I think WWE have done really well pay-per-view wise in the pandemic era. It's just that it's mostly Raw, if I'm being honest, but the TV product is difficult at times. But to feel that like electricity, and if anyone listening to this or whatever has never been to an indie show, or if you are just a mainstream fan, again, that's fine. But even as an example, going to like the Empress Ballroom to see the Blackpool takeover, it's like that intimate. You guys know there's nothing like it when there's only like, I don't know, it's not even 2,000 of you probably in the room.
Yeah.
But if the roar and like how intimate and close it is, I recommend it to any wrestling fan, man. They have to get out there.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I was quite late to the scene. The first time I went to a UK wrestling scene would have been when Kurt Angle came across to wrestle Jack Sabre.
Wow, yeah.
And
was that York Hall?
Was it? Yeah, I can't remember how many years ago that was. He wasn't with WWE at the time, so fair few, might be a decade or so. But turned up not expecting too much, just sort of thinking it would be like a church fete almost would be there. And the quality was, and we were sat there, 4 of us, all wrestling fans, all WWE fans, all been to watch pay-per-views in the States and stuff. And we were sat there and we were absolutely gobsmacked at the quality. And then since then, been up to Ali Pali a couple of times to see the Progress events. And we were at Wembley. The quality is actually phenomenal. And the crowd is so vociferous, so into it, so keen. It's actually it's phenomenal. If you're into wrestling and you're watching WWE, you should really be dropping into some of these local shows, and you really, really, they're just phenomenal, really enjoyable.
I think you've touched on the beauty of it there as well. You go to a show, you have no idea who some of these people are, and you fall in love with them, and then their journey becomes like passionate to you, right? You see them make it to NXT UK or even beyond that and whatever, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, look at them. And yeah, I think that's one of the best things about going to those shows. You're having your eyes opened.
Yeah. Seeing Keith Lee before he was Keith Lee. Well, I haven't seen him recently, but then you see him on the show, you've got a connection to him, and you feel his journey, you feel his pain, you hear his story, and you root for him even more.
Yeah, absolutely.
dare I say, it's almost like a community feel, right? You feel like you're part of something. Alex, on that happy high note, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on and chew the curd with you. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Anytime, boys, anytime. You know what should happen is you should come on my Talk Wrestling show and battle each other in the quiz. That's what should happen.
Oh, you know, we're different generations as well, so I don't know anything pre-attitude, and he doesn't know anything post. Montreal screw job or something.
I could rig it.
Yeah. Take your pick. That sounds good.
When is that show, Alex? Give it a plug.
Oh, there you go. What a skillful man you are. It's every Monday, 7 till 9. I don't know when this goes out, but this week we've got the Mysterios. I spoke to Ray and Dom yesterday. We've got some NXT UK stuff. Sam Gradwell is going to be coming on. And I don't even know if I can say this yet, but I'm going to anyway. Scorpio Sky from AEW as well, because of course it's Double or Nothing week next week. So there's always good guests. And of course, you two battling each other, hopefully.
And what is that? TalkSport 2?
TalkSport 2, yeah, 7 till 9 every Monday.
Right.
We'll give it a listen and listen to ourselves, maybe.
Well, hold on a second. Before we commit to the quiz, let's just see what these questions are. Because if it's like on the July 7th episode of Raw in 2001, which wrestler did this? I'm probably out.
I'll make you a healthy mixture. Don't worry.
Main events of WrestleMania has gone by, something like that.
Yeah. Top 5 now.
Alex, cheers.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in ND. Putting wrestling into submission. Welcome to Wrestling Rebooked with Spoiler and Andeve, rewriting your favorite angles the way we want to believe. Putting wrestling into submission, finally that time has come. We used to rely on Meltzer, now we bang our own drum. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. The Spot Monkey is here, shooting from the hip, back to break more, and ready to let rip. Spoiler is the host. Will his mic be ready to go? He loves a mat clinic, and we're ready to start the show. From Mania to Survivor Series, a wrestling podcast. Each match rebooked, fresh views are cast. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in ND, putting wrestling into submission. Our finger is on the pulse for all the latest news. What's going on with Vince? We don't really get his views. We love a docket review, old school to new. I think it's time to tap out. Hit the music. We're through. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in ND, putting wrestling into submission.